She was just a passenger on Flight 227, hiding her dangerous past. But when the plane started losing control at 36,000 feet, the pilots couldn't save it. She realized with horror, she was the only one who could help. Speak up and reveal everything, or stay silent and let everyone die. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Sarah Chen looked like everyone else on Flight 227. She sat in seat 12C, next to the window. She wore simple jeans and a gray sweater. Her sneakers were old and comfortable. She had a paperback book in her lap and a small backpack under the seat in front of her. Nobody looked at her twice. The flight attendant served her coffee with a polite smile. Sarah smiled back and said thank you quietly. The man next to her, a businessman in a suit, was typing furiously on his laptop. He barely noticed she was there. That's exactly what Sarah wanted. To be invisible. To be nobody special. But Sarah Chen had a secret. 8 years ago, Sarah was one of the best test pilots in America. She flew experimental planes that most pilots were too scared to touch. She worked for major aerospace companies, testing aircraft that pushed the limits of what was possible. She flew planes so dangerous that they needed computers just to stay in the air. Without those computers, the planes would spin out of control and crash within seconds. Sarah had logged over 2,000 hours flying these death machines. She had survived situations that killed other pilots. She knew things about flying that even experienced commercial pilots had never learned. She understood aircraft control systems at a level that few people in the world could match. She remembered one flight 5 years ago. She was testing a new fighter jet prototype. The computer failed at 40,000 feet. The plane immediately went into a violent spin. Most pilots would have ejected. But Sarah stayed calm. She remembered her training. She used the engines asymmetrically, creating forces that counteracted the spin. She saved the aircraft. She saved millions of dollars. The engineers called it a miracle. Sarah called it physics. But flying those planes took a toll on her. Every flight could be her last. Every takeoff meant saying goodbye to her family, not knowing if she'd see them again. The stress was crushing. The responsibility was overwhelming. So 5 years ago, Sarah quit. She walked away from test flying. She became a private consultant, working from home, living a quiet life. When she flew now, she flew as a passenger. Anonymous, unremarkable, hidden. Flight 227 was supposed to be just another routine flight. Chicago to Los Angeles. 3 hours in the air. Sarah would read her book, maybe take a nap, and land safely. Simple. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner was beautiful. It was one of the most advanced commercial aircraft in the world. It had 184 passengers today and a crew of 10. The pilots were experienced professionals. The weather was perfect, clear skies, no turbulence expected. Everything was ideal. The plane took off smoothly from Chicago O'Hare at 8:47 a.m. The engines hummed steadily. The aircraft climbed through the clouds and leveled off at 36,000 feet. The seatbelt sign turned off. People started moving around. Flight attendants began drink service. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain James Mitchell. We've reached our cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. Weather looks great all the way to Los Angeles. We should arrive right on schedule at 11:45 a.m. Pacific Time. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Sarah opened her book. It was a thriller about a detective solving a murder case. She had read 3 chapters when she felt it. A vibration. It was tiny. Almost imperceptible. Most people wouldn't notice it. But Sarah wasn't most people. She had spent 8 years learning to feel what aircraft were telling her. Every vibration had meaning. Every unusual movement was a message. She closed her book slowly and placed it in her lap. She placed her hands flat on the armrests. She closed her eyes and focused. There it was again. A slight oscillation in the plane's movement. It felt wrong. It felt like the beginning of something bad. Sarah opened her eyes and looked around. Nobody else seemed to notice anything. The businessman next to her was still typing. A woman across the aisle was watching a movie. A child was coloring in a coloring book. Everything looked normal. But Sarah knew better. That vibration was the first warning sign. Something was wrong with Flight 227. In the cockpit, Captain James Mitchell was feeling the same vibration that Sarah had noticed. Mitchell was 52 years old. He had been flying commercial aircraft for 19 years. He had over 13,000 flight hours. He knew planes like some people know their own cars. Next to him sat First Officer Patricia Hoffman. She was 34 years old, sharp-minded and professional. She had been flying with Mitchell for 2 years. They worked well together. They trusted each other. "You feel that?" Mitchell asked, keeping his hands steady on the controls. Hoffman looked at her instruments. All the displays showed normal. Everything was green. "Feel what?" "There's a vibration. Something's not right with the flight controls." Hoffman focused. Then she felt it too, a subtle wrongness in how the plane was responding. "I feel it now." "What do you think it is?" "I don't know yet. But I don't like it." The autopilot was controlling the plane. In modern aircraft, the computer does most of the flying. The autopilot adjusts the control surfaces constantly, making tiny corrections to keep the plane stable and on course. The pilots monitor everything, but the computer does the actual flying. Mitchell watched his instruments carefully. The altitude was steady at 36,000 feet. The heading was correct. The airspeed was normal. But that vibration was still there, like a warning whisper. Then it happened. Without warning, the nose of the plane suddenly pitched up. Violently. The aircraft's nose pointed toward the sky at a steep angle. Mitchell's body pressed back into his seat. Hoffman gasped. "What the hell?" Mitchell grabbed the controls. The plane held the steep nose-up attitude for 3 seconds. Then, just as suddenly, the nose dropped back down. The plane leveled off. The whole event lasted maybe 5 seconds. In the cabin, passengers felt the sudden movement. Some people screamed. Drinks spilled. A laptop fell from a tray table and clattered to the floor. The businessman next to Sarah gripped his armrests, his knuckles turning white. "What was that?" someone shouted. "Just turbulence," a flight attendant said quickly, trying to calm people. But her voice wasn't convincing. Her hands were shaking. Most passengers wanted to believe it was turbulence. They wanted to believe everything was fine. People are good at denying danger. It's a survival mechanism. If you convince yourself everything is okay, you don't have to be afraid. But Sarah knew it wasn't turbulence. Turbulence doesn't make a plane pitch up that suddenly and that violently. That movement was caused by something else. Something mechanical. Something wrong with the flight control system. Her heart started beating faster. She knew what that pitch-up pattern meant. She had experienced it before in experimental aircraft. It was the signature of a control system malfunction, specifically, an oscillation caused by phase lag between pilot input and control surface response. In simple terms, the plane's controls were fighting themselves. The computers were sending commands, but the physical parts that moved the plane weren't responding correctly. There was a delay. That delay created a feedback loop. The plane would overcorrect, then overcorrect the other direction, then overcorrect again. Each time getting worse. And if it wasn't stopped, it would tear the plane apart. In the cockpit, Mitchell made a decision. I'm disconnecting the autopilot. Are you sure? Hoffman asked. The autopilot might be causing the problem. We need manual control. Mitchell pressed the autopilot disconnect button. A warning chime sounded. Now Mitchell was flying the plane with his own hands, not the computer. But the moment he took manual control, he felt something terrifying. The plane felt wrong. The controls felt sluggish and delayed. When he moved the control stick, the plane didn't respond immediately. There was a lag, like flying through thick mud. This doesn't feel right, Mitchell said quietly. The controls are delayed. Hoffman was scanning her instruments frantically. All systems show normal. I'm not seeing any errors. I'm telling you, something is wrong. The plane isn't responding correctly. Mitchell tried to maintain level flight. But the plane started pitching up again. He pushed the stick forward to level it out. The plane responded, but too much. The nose dropped too far. He pulled back. The nose came up too much. He was fighting an invisible force. We've got an oscillation, Hoffman said, her voice tight with tension. Captain, the plane is oscillating. She was right. The plane was now moving up and down in a rhythm. Nose up, nose down, nose up, nose down. Each cycle was getting bigger. Each movement was more violent than the last. Mitchell keyed his radio. Denver Center, this is Flight 227. We are experiencing control anomalies. Requesting immediate clearance for emergency descent and return to nearest airport. The air traffic controller's voice came back immediately. Flight 227, Roger. What is the nature of your emergency? We have flight control problems. The aircraft is oscillating. We're losing control. There was a brief pause. Then, Flight 227, you are cleared for immediate descent. Emergency services are being notified. Descend at your discretion. We're clearing all traffic from your path. The plane rolled suddenly to the left. Hard. The wing dipped at a dangerous angle. Passengers on the left side felt like they were falling. People screamed. A woman started crying. The flight attendant in the back fell to her knees, unable to keep her balance. Mitchell fought the controls, trying to level the wings. But when he corrected, the plane rolled too far to the right. Then back to the left. The plane was now oscillating in roll and pitch simultaneously. It was every pilot's nightmare. Loss of control. Sarah sat in seat 12C, feeling every movement. She understood exactly what was happening. The control system had entered an unstable oscillation mode. The pilots were making it worse by trying to fight it. Every input they made was adding energy to the oscillation, making it bigger. They were going to crash unless someone did something immediately. The altitude indicator was unwinding. 36,000 feet. 35,000 feet. 34,000 feet. The plane was descending rapidly, but not in a controlled way. It was falling while oscillating wildly. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling with a sudden whoosh. They dangled in front of passengers' faces like jellyfish. Some people grabbed them and put them on. Others were too scared to move. A mother held her young daughter tight. It's okay, baby. It's okay. We're okay. But her voice was shaking. She didn't believe her own words. An elderly man had his eyes closed. His lips were moving silently. He was praying. The businessman next to Sarah was gripping the armrest so hard that his fingers were white. Are we going to die? He whispered. Sarah didn't answer. She was making a calculation in her head. She was weighing options. She could stay in her seat, hidden and anonymous. Or she could reveal herself and try to save everyone. If she did nothing, everyone would die. The pilots didn't know how to fix this problem. It wasn't in their training. This type of oscillation was something only test pilots encountered. Only someone with her specialized knowledge could stop it. But if she revealed herself, her quiet life was over. Everyone would know who she was. Her anonymity would be destroyed forever. The plane rolled violently to the right. Someone vomited. A child was screaming continuously. The flight attendants were strapped into their jump seats, holding on, unable to help anyone. 32,000 feet. 31,000 feet. They were falling. Sarah made her decision. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. The plane was bucking wildly, but Sarah had trained for this. She knew how to move in an unstable aircraft. She grabbed seat backs as she moved forward toward the cockpit. "Ma'am. Sit down," the flight attendant yelled. Sarah ignored her and kept moving. "Ma'am. You need to sit down now." Sarah reached the cockpit door and pressed the intercom button. "I need to speak to the pilots. Right now. It's an emergency." The flight attendant tried to pull her back. "You can't go in there." Sarah turned and looked directly into the flight attendant's eyes. "I'm a test pilot. I know what's happening to this plane. If I don't help them right now, everyone on this aircraft will die. Do you understand? Everyone." The flight attendant saw something in Sarah's eyes, absolute certainty, absolute confidence. She hesitated, then nodded and pressed the cockpit intercom. "Captain, there's a passenger here. She says she's a test pilot. She says she knows what's wrong." There was a pause. The plane rolled hard again. Then Mitchell's voice came through, "Send her in." The cockpit door opened. Sarah stepped into the cockpit. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Hoffman both turned to look at her. Mitchell's face was covered in sweat. His jaw was clenched. Hoffman's eyes were wide with stress and fear. The control stick was shaking in Mitchell's hands. The instruments showed the plane was at 29,000 feet and descending rapidly. The artificial horizon display was tilting wildly back and forth. "Who are you?" Mitchell demanded. "My name is Sarah Chen. I was a test pilot for 8 years. I flew experimental aircraft with unstable control systems. What you're experiencing is a phase lag oscillation. Your control inputs are creating a feedback loop that's making the oscillation worse." Mitchell tried to process what she was saying while fighting the controls. "What does that mean?" "It means every time you try to correct the plane, you're making the problem bigger. The control surfaces are responding too slowly. By the time they respond to your input, the plane has already moved past where you wanted it to be. So you overcorrect. Then you overcorrect the other way. It's a cycle that keeps getting bigger until the plane tears itself apart or crashes." Hoffman stared at Sarah. "How do you know this?" "Because I've experienced it, multiple times that I in experimental jets, this exact pattern. And I know how to fix it." The plane pitched down violently. The nose pointed toward the earth. Through the windscreen, Mitchell could see the ground getting closer. 27,000 feet. 26,000 feet. "Tell me what to do," Mitchell said. There was no ego in his voice. No pride. Just desperation. He knew he was losing his aircraft. "Stop fighting it," Sarah said firmly. "You have to dampen the oscillation, not force it to stop. Make smaller inputs. Much smaller. Move with the rhythm of the oscillation, not against it. Think of a swing on a playground. If you push at the wrong time, the swing goes crazy. But if you push gently at the right time, you can slow it down." Mitchell tried it. Instead of making large control inputs, he made tiny ones. Gentle touches on the stick instead of big movements. The plane still oscillated, but something changed. The movement started getting slightly smaller instead of bigger. "It's working," Hoffman breathed. "The amplitude is decreasing. But then the plane rolled hard to the left again. The oscillation hadn't stopped. It had just shifted from pitch to roll. "We still have the roll problem," Mitchell said through gritted teeth. Sarah looked at the engine throttles. She had an idea. It was unconventional. It wasn't in any training manual. But she had done it before in test aircraft. "Use asymmetric thrust," she said. "What?" Mitchell and Hoffman said simultaneously. "Your engines. Increase power on the left engine, decrease power on the right engine. It will create a yaw force that counteracts the roll oscillation." Mitchell hesitated. Using asymmetric thrust on purpose went against every instinct. It would make the plane want to turn. It would push them off course. "If we do that, we'll go off heading," he said. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "But you'll be alive and off heading. Or you can stay on heading and crash. Your choice, Captain." Mitchell looked at Sarah's eyes. He saw absolute confidence there. She wasn't guessing. She knew. She had done this before. He made his decision. "Tell me exactly what to do." "Right engine to idle," Sarah instructed. "Left engine to maximum thrust. Do it smoothly, not suddenly." Mitchell's hands moved to the throttle levers. He pulled the right throttle back toward idle while pushing the left throttle to maximum power. The asymmetric thrust created an immediate effect. The plane began yawing, rotating around its vertical axis. But something else happened too. The roll oscillation started decreasing. The wild wing-rocking motion became less violent. The physics were working exactly as Sarah predicted. "It's dampening," Hoffman said, hope entering her voice for the first time. "The roll oscillation is decreasing. Now reduce your pitch inputs even more," Sarah said calmly. "Stop trying to hold a specific altitude. Let the plane find its natural equilibrium. It wants to stabilize itself. You're preventing that by forcing it." This went against everything Mitchell had been taught. A pilot's job was to control the aircraft. To command it. To make it do what you wanted. But Sarah was telling him to let go. To trust the plane to stabilize itself. He eased off the control stick. He stopped trying to maintain altitude. He just held the stick very lightly, making tiny adjustments. And incredibly, the plane started to settle. The violent oscillations became moderate oscillations. Then small oscillations. The rhythm was slowing down. The amplitude was shrinking. 24,000 feet. 23,000 feet. They were still descending, but the descent was more controlled now. The plane wasn't trying to kill them anymore. "Try engaging the autopilot in pitch-hold mode only," Sarah suggested. "Let the computer handle pitch while you manually control roll. The computer's damping algorithm should stabilize the pitch completely." Mitchell looked at her skeptically. The autopilot might have caused this problem in the first place. "Probably," Sarah agreed. "But pitch-hold mode is different. It's an isolated system. It should work independently of the roll control." Mitchell made the decision. He engaged pitch-hold mode on the autopilot. Immediately, the pitch oscillations stopped completely. The computer's sophisticated algorithms dampened the pitch movement perfectly. The plane's nose stabilized at a constant angle. "We have pitch control," Mitchell announced, relief flooding through him. Solid pitch control. Now they only had to worry about roll and yaw. Mitchell could handle that manually with Sarah's guidance. The crisis was becoming manageable. "Start reducing the engine differential gradually," Sarah advised. 5% at a time. Wait 10 seconds between adjustments. If you correct too fast, you might re-excite the oscillation. Mitchell began slowly bringing the engine power back to equal. Right engine up 5%. Wait. Right engine up another 5%. Wait. He was patient. Methodical. Each adjustment brought the plane closer to normal flight. The yaw decreased. The heading straightened out. The plane was flying almost normally now. 20,000 feet. 18,000 feet. Denver International Airport was visible ahead. The runways looked like gray ribbons across the brown landscape. They were going to make it. Hoffman was running through the landing checklist. Gear down, she said. Mitchell lowered the landing gear. 3 green lights appeared, nose gear and 2 main gears locked in position. Flaps 20, Mitchell ordered. The flaps extended, changing the wing shape for landing. The plane slowed down. Flaps 30. More flaps. More drag. The plane configured itself for landing. Sarah stood behind the pilots, watching. Her job was done. She had given them the knowledge they needed. Now it was up to their skill and experience to land the aircraft. The control tower's voice came over the radio. Flight 227, you are cleared to land on any runway. Emergency vehicles are standing by. You're doing great. Bring her home. They crossed the runway threshold at 500 feet altitude. The plane was perfectly aligned with the centerline. Mitchell's hands were steady now. The fear had been replaced by professional focus. He flared the nose up slightly, bleeding off speed. The main wheels touched the runway with a gentle thump. A perfect landing. We're down, Mitchell said quietly. We're actually down. The nose wheel touched. Mitchell deployed the thrust reversers. The engines roared as they pushed against the plane's forward momentum. The brakes engaged. The plane decelerated smoothly down the runway. They rolled to a stop on the taxiway. Mitchell shut down the engines. The cockpit became quiet. Outside, fire trucks and ambulances surrounded them, lights flashing. For a moment, nobody spoke. They just sat there, processing what had happened. They had been moments from death. And now they were alive. Mitchell turned in his seat and looked at Sarah. His eyes were wet with tears. You saved us, he said, his voice breaking. You saved everyone. Sarah felt her legs go weak. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the full weight of what had just happened hit her. She had saved 194 lives. But she had also revealed herself. Her secret was out. Her quiet life was over. First Officer Hoffman stood up and hugged Sarah tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. I have 2 kids at home. Because of you, I get to see them again. In the cabin, passengers were crying, hugging each other, some were laughing with relief. They didn't know the details of what had happened in the cockpit. They just knew they were alive when they thought they were going to die. Someone started clapping. Then another person, then everyone. The entire cabin erupted in applause. People were cheering, crying, clapping. It was the sound of gratitude. The sound of survival. The businessman who had been sitting next to Sarah was among the first off the plane. He immediately found a reporter in the terminal. There was a woman, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. She got up during the emergency. She went to the cockpit. She saved us all. Within minutes, the media knew there was a hero on Flight 227. A mysterious passenger who had intervened during the crisis. Federal investigators boarded the plane immediately. FAA officials, NTSB representatives, Boeing engineers, they all wanted answers. What had happened? How had the plane been saved? They took Sarah to a private room in the terminal. A senior NTSB investigator sat across from her. Ms. Chen, can you explain what happened up there? Sarah took a deep breath and began explaining. She used technical terms. She drew diagrams. She explained the physics of phase lag oscillations, feedback loops, and asymmetric thrust dampening. The investigators listened with growing amazement. A Boeing engineer was taking frantic notes. This failure mode isn't in our training protocols, he admitted. Our pilots aren't taught how to handle this. They should be, Sarah said firmly. This can happen to any fly-by-wire aircraft. It's rare, but it's possible. And when it happens, you have only minutes to fix it or everyone dies. Will you help us? The FAA official asked. Will you help us develop new training procedures? Sarah thought about it. She had wanted to hide. She had wanted a quiet life. But maybe that wasn't her purpose. Maybe she was meant to share her knowledge. Maybe she was meant to teach others so they could save lives too. Yes, she said. I'll help. Outside the interview room, reporters had gathered. News vans filled the airport parking lot. Cameras were everywhere. The story was spreading fast. Mysterious passenger saves Flight 227. When Sarah finally emerged from the interview room, microphones were shoved toward her face. Questions came from every direction. Ms. Chen, how did you know what to do? Were you scared? Do you consider yourself a hero? How does it feel to save 194 lives? Sarah stood in front of the cameras. She was tired. She was emotionally drained. But she owed these people, the public, an explanation. I'm not a hero, she said clearly. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Hoffman are the heroes. They had the skill and courage to try something unconventional. They listened when it mattered. They trusted guidance from an unexpected source. That's what saved everyone. But you knew what to do when they didn't, a reporter insisted. I had knowledge they didn't have, Sarah admitted. I had experienced this specific problem in experimental aircraft. But knowledge is useless without someone willing to act on it. They acted. They're the heroes. Why were you hiding that you were a test pilot? Another reporter asked. Sarah paused. It was a fair question. Because I was tired of the pressure, she said honestly. I was tired of living on the edge of death every day. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to disappear. But today taught me something important. We can't hide from who we are. Sometimes our skills are needed, even when we don't want them to be. Sometimes we have to step up, even when it costs us everything. A reporter asked, what did it cost you? Sarah looked directly at the camera. My anonymity.my quiet life.my invisibility. I gave all that up today. But in return, 194 people are alive. That's a trade I'd make again. The crowd fell silent. People watching at home felt tears in their eyes. This wasn't just a story about a plane crash that didn't happen. It was a story about sacrifice. About duty, about using your gifts to help others, even when you'd rather hide. Over the next 2 weeks, investigators tore Flight 227 apart looking for answers. They examined every system. They downloaded data from the flight recorders. They interviewed the pilots multiple times. They consulted with Sarah constantly. What they discovered shocked the aviation world. There was nothing mechanically wrong with the plane. Every control surface worked perfectly. Every computer functioned correctly. Every sensor gave accurate readings. The problem was in the interaction between systems during a specific type of failure. When Captain Mitchell disconnected the autopilot, he removed the computer's dampening algorithms. Without those algorithms, the manual control system became a simple mechanical linkage. And simple mechanical linkages can oscillate. The pilot's natural tendency to correct the plane's movements actually made the oscillation worse. It was like pushing a child on a swing at the wrong time. Instead of stopping the swing, you make it go higher. Sarah's solution, using asymmetric thrust and minimal control inputs, was counterintuitive. It went against normal pilot training. But it was exactly right for this specific failure mode. A senior Boeing engineer presented the findings to Sarah. You identified a gap in our design philosophy, he said. We assumed pilots would always keep the autopilot engaged during anomalies. We didn't consider what would happen if they disconnected it during an oscillation event. You need to train for it, Sarah said. Every commercial pilot needs to understand this failure mode. They need to practice it in simulators. They need to know what it feels like and how to recover. Boeing immediately issued a safety bulletin to every airline in the world. They updated the flight manual for the 787. They created new simulator scenarios. They mandated training for all pilots who flew fly-by-wire aircraft. Sarah became a consultant for the project. She helped design the training program. She worked with simulator engineers to recreate the exact conditions she had experienced. She taught instructors how to recognize the early signs of oscillation. In the months that followed, 3 other flights experienced similar problems. But this time, the pilots knew what to do. They recognized the pattern. They applied Sarah's techniques. All 3 aircraft landed safely. Hundreds more lives were saved because of the knowledge Sarah shared. 6 months after Flight 227, Sarah stood on a stage in Washington, D.C. The Secretary of Transportation was presenting her with the Presidential Citizens Medal for extraordinary service to the nation. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Hoffman stood beside her, receiving commendations for their courage and professionalism. Ms. Chen's actions saved 194 lives that day, the Secretary said. But her willingness to share her knowledge has saved countless more. Because of her, aviation is safer. Because of her, pilots around the world are better prepared. She exemplifies the best of American expertise and selfless service. The audience, filled with aviation officials, pilots, engineers, and survivors from Flight 227, stood and applauded. Some people were crying. The passengers from Flight 227 had never forgotten what Sarah did for them. Many of them had become her friends. They stayed in contact. They sent her cards on the anniversary of the incident. After the ceremony, Sarah spoke to reporters again. She was more comfortable with media attention now. She had learned to use it as a platform to advocate for better aviation safety. This medal belongs to everyone who works to make flying safer, she said. The engineers who design safer planes, the pilots who train constantly, the investigators who learn from every incident. Aviation safety is a team effort. I just happened to be in the right place with the right knowledge at the right time. But everyone knew it was more than that. Sarah had made a choice. She could have stayed in her seat. She could have remained anonymous. But she chose to act. She chose to reveal herself. She chose to save lives even though it cost her the quiet life she wanted. Captain Mitchell approached her after the ceremony. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Really?" Sarah smiled. "Better than I expected. I thought I'd hate the attention. But I've found purpose again. Teaching other pilots, sharing what I know, it feels right. It feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Good," Mitchell said. "Because we need people like you. We need experts who are willing to step forward and share their knowledge." 1 year after the incident, all 194 passengers and crew from Flight 227 gathered in Denver for a reunion. They met at a hotel near the airport, the same airport where Sarah had saved their lives. The event was emotional from the moment people started arriving. Strangers who had been through trauma together hugged like old friends. They had all been in that plane together. They had all faced death together. They had all survived together. Sarah walked into the banquet hall and was immediately surrounded by people wanting to thank her. An elderly man with tears in his eyes approached first. "Ms. Chen, I'm Richard. I was sitting in row 18. I'm 79 years old now. I was flying to Los Angeles to meet my great-grandson for the first time. I thought I would die without ever seeing his face. But because of you, I got to hold him. I've been able to watch him grow for a whole year now. You gave me that gift." A young mother came next, holding a little girl's hand. "This is Emma. She's 5 now. She was 4 when we were on that flight. She doesn't really remember what happened, but I do. Every day when I tuck her into bed, I think about you. I think about how close I came to never tucking her in again. Thank you for giving me more time with my daughter." A businessman, the same man who had sat next to Sarah, approached with his wife. "Sarah, this is my wife, Michelle. We've been married for 15 years, but I took her for granted. That day on Flight 227 changed me. When I thought I was going to die, all I could think about was her. Now I tell her I love her every single day. You didn't just save my life. You saved my marriage too." One by one, passengers shared their stories. How the incident changed them. How they appreciated life more. How they didn't take things for granted anymore. How they were better parents, better spouses, better people because they had faced death and survived. A teenager approached shyly. His name was Marcus. He was 17 years old now, 16 when the incident happened. "Ms. Chen, I just wanted to tell you that because of you, I'm studying aerospace engineering at MIT. I want to design safer planes. I want to solve problems like you do. You inspired me to use my brain to help people." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the love and gratitude in the room. She had been worried that revealing herself would ruin her life. But instead, it had given her life new meaning. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was making a real difference in the world. Captain Mitchell stood up and clinked his glass for attention. The room fell silent. "Everyone, I want to say something," Mitchell began. "A year ago, we all shared the worst experience of our lives. We thought we were going to die. I was in the cockpit, and I'm telling you honestly, I didn't know how to save that plane. I had 19 years of experience, thousands of flight hours, and I was helpless." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. But then a passenger stood up. A quiet woman who nobody had noticed. She walked into my cockpit and gave me knowledge I didn't have. She was calm when everyone else was terrified. She was confident when I was losing hope. And because of her, we're all here today. Mitchell raised his glass. To Sarah Chen. Who taught us that heroes don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like ordinary passengers. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight. Sometimes they sacrifice everything they want for people they've never met. To Sarah. To Sarah, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Sarah stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you all," she said, her voice shaking. "You've all given me something too. You've given me purpose. You've shown me that hiding isn't the answer. That using our gifts, whatever they are, to help others is what life is really about. I tried to disappear, but you brought me back to life. So thank you." Sarah Chen now runs the Advanced Flight Safety Institute in Seattle. It's a training facility where pilots from around the world come to learn advanced recovery techniques for unusual flight situations. She teaches them everything she knows. Everything she learned from 8 years of test flying. Everything that saved Flight 227. The institute has become famous in aviation circles. Major airlines send their best pilots there. Military test pilots train there. Even NASA astronauts come to learn from Sarah. She still flies regularly now. She got back into test flying part-time, consulting for companies developing new aircraft. But she's careful now. She takes fewer risks. She has too many people counting on her to be reckless. The wall of her office is covered with photos. Pictures from the Flight 227 reunion, letters from passengers thanking her, certificates from aviation organizations. But her favorite item is a simple handwritten note from Emma, the little girl who was 4 years old on Flight 227. The note says, "Dear Ms. Chen, thank you for saving my mommy. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you. Love, Emma." Sarah keeps that note on her desk where she can see it every day. It reminds her why she does what she does. Why she couldn't stay hidden. Why she had to step forward. Captain Mitchell retired from commercial flying 2 years ago, but he still visits Sarah's institute regularly. He teaches a course on decision-making during emergencies. He tells every class the story of Flight 227. He tells them about the moment he had to trust a stranger. About the moment he had to put aside his ego and listen. The most important thing I learned that day, Mitchell always says, is that expertise can come from anywhere. The person who saves your life might not look like a hero. They might look like nobody special. But if you're wise enough to listen, if you're humble enough to accept help, you might just survive. First Officer Hoffman is now a captain herself, flying international routes. She visits Sarah's institute twice a year to guest lecture. She talks about crew resource management, how to work together effectively during emergencies. She always mentions Sarah as the perfect example of effective communication under pressure. The passengers from Flight 227 have stayed connected. They have a group chat. They share life updates. Birthdays, weddings, new babies. They've become a family, bonded by trauma and survival. Every year on the anniversary of the incident, they gather in Denver. The group gets bigger each year as people bring their families. Children who were babies on Flight 227 are now in elementary school. The teenager who was inspired to study engineering is now working at Boeing, helping design the next generation of safer aircraft. Sarah attends every reunion. She wouldn't miss it. These people saved her just as much as she saved them. They taught her that hiding wasn't living. That using your gifts matters. That making a difference is worth any cost. At the most recent reunion, a new person approached Sarah. She was a young woman, maybe 25 years old. Ms. Chen, my name is Jessica. I wasn't on Flight 227, but I wanted to meet you. 3 months ago, I was on a flight from San Francisco to New York. We experienced control problems. The plane started oscillating. The pilots looked panicked. Sarah listened intently. But then the captain said something over the intercom, Jessica continued. He said, I've trained for this exact situation at the Advanced Flight Safety Institute. We're going to use a technique called asymmetric thrust dampening. We'll be on the ground in 20 minutes. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. And we were. He landed the plane safely. 220 passengers survived because of what you taught him. Because you were willing to share your knowledge. I just wanted to say thank you. You saved my life, and you weren't even there. Sarah hugged Jessica tightly. This was the ripple effect she had never imagined. She had saved Flight 227. But by teaching others, by sharing what she knew, she had saved so many more. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands. And the number would keep growing as more pilots learned from her. She was just a passenger on Flight 227, until the plane started to lose control. But the truth is, Sarah Chen was never just a passenger. She was an expert hiding in plain sight. She was a hero waiting for her moment. She was a teacher who hadn't found her students yet. The plane losing control wasn't the moment that defined her. The moment that defined her was when she chose to stand up. When she chose to reveal herself, when she chose to sacrifice her comfortable anonymity to save lives. That choice changed everything. Not just for the 194 people on Flight 227. But for every passenger on every flight that followed. For every pilot who trained at her institute. For every person who learned that expertise matters, that knowledge can save lives, that heroes are often hidden among us. Sarah Chen's quiet life ended that day. But her meaningful life began. She learned that you can't hide from who you really are. You can't bury your gifts and talents and expect to feel fulfilled. Sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be. Sometimes it creates a crisis that forces you to reveal yourself. Sometimes it asks you to choose between comfort and purpose. Sarah chose purpose. And in doing so, she found something she didn't even know she was looking for, a reason to stop hiding. A reason to step into the light. A reason to be seen. Today, when Sarah boards a commercial flight as a passenger, people sometimes recognize her. They ask for autographs. They want to take photos. They thank her for what she did. She's always gracious. Always humble. She signs the autographs and takes the photos. But inside, she smiles. Because she's not hiding anymore. She's not trying to be invisible. She's comfortable being seen. Comfortable being known. Comfortable being the person she was always meant to be. The girl who wanted to disappear became the woman who couldn't hide. And the world is safer because of it. She was just a passenger on Flight 227, until the plane started to lose control. But really, she was always more than just a passenger. She was always a pilot. Always an expert, always a hero. She just needed 194 people's lives hanging in the balance to remind her of that truth. And now, she'll never forget it again.